So we've hit the top of the hill and we're now starting down, and we call this the change slot or the nickel slot. It looks like a change slot that you would put in a candy machine and you would get your change back. We created this trail with a group of high school kids by walking through the woodland and going to places that looked interesting. And this was one of the places that looked interesting to us. And it turns out it's more interesting than we thought. We thought this was this little mound of dirt here, this high area in the woodland, we saw as a glacial moraine, meaning that when the glaciers were here, a mile of ice upon us, on top of us, and the front of that glacial edge is going to really carry a lot of soil and dirt and rock and everything ahead of it. And underneath it too, as it continues to roll south, I mean, these rolled as far south as Cape Cod and also to Long Island, New York. They carry a lot of soil and they build it up into what we call moraines, which are these mounds and sometimes meandering mounds of loose rock and soil. And so anyway, we look at these rocks here. I can tell you this is granite. This is probably basement rock, meaning that this is the bedrock of this particular area, although there are many pieces that are broken apart, have not been transported very far, but probably transported a little bit by the glacier that was above it. That event, by the way, was 8,000 or 10,000 years ago. So anyway, we looked at this rock one day and realized that there were drill holes in the rock. And it's a striking thing to find out in the middle of the woods drill holes. I mean, I can stick my finger into each one of these. That's as big around as my index finger is. And I can tell you this was not machine made because the holes are somewhat irregular. They're smooth on the inside, but they're not, it's not a machine. It was not bored in by a machine. And I can only interpret that somebody did this, because it's in a linear fashion, that a person did this. And the person probably had an auger that they used by hand and drilled through the rock here. And it's sort of a question, why would somebody do that out in the middle of the woods? Well, back in the day, 150, 200 years ago, this was a field. This was probably a sheep meadow. It's surrounded by stone walls, and these rocks, as in the configuration of this change slot, is striking and easy to see. So we walk down the hill a little bit, and we come across another series of drill holes, although there is a split in this particular rock, but the drill holes are there. There's one, there's one, there's one, and again they're pretty smooth but somewhat irregular on the inside. And so my guess is that they came with pry bars and metal pry bars, and they would stick the pry bars into the drill holes and they would work the rock back and forth. Probably somebody was up here with a hammer and a set of chisels trying to chisel off a big piece of granite so that it could then be used in building or in creating a grist millstone or something of that sort. Because they wanted a regular, fairly even piece of rock. And if you come down the hill through the nickel slot, you got to be careful here, because this trail is a little bumpy and jumpy at places. You got to be careful going through here. At the base of the nickel slot is in fact a very large nickel. Okay, I'm being facetious, but I'm standing on a great big piece of granite that is that thick, and it is round. It is absolutely round, evenly round, for 3/4 of the way around the rock. And then it kind of breaks off and becomes square. I think they pried this piece of rock out of that nickel slot, dragged it down here, and then began, a stonesmith then worked it to create it into a round disc. And the reason they wanted a round disc was to create a grist millstone. This is how they ground their flours their corn and their wheat to turn it into flour that can be used. So what we're standing on is an abandoned grist mill stone that was pried out of the rocks that are in the nickel slot. Thank you. We'll see you at the next stop.